Hi Mark, thanks for joining us this morning.
No problem at
Um,
all.
we'll jump straight into it. So, in terms of you and your career before Pro, can you just give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so what got me started in the sports industry was we have a sport over here in Ireland called hurling. So I got originally involved in the balls that are used in that sport. So I started importing hurling sliotar, they're called. So they're kind of similar to a baseball or a cricket ball, but just have rims on them. So I got started into that, selling those to clubs all over Ireland, and an awful lot of them were asking me about hurling helmets. So hurling helmet would be kind of similar to a cricket or lacrosse helmet. A PPE shell with a stainless steel face guard. So that kind of got me started into sports helmets. I designed a range of hurling helmets, and that gave me an awful lot of experience in terms of impact protection and also test methodologies for sports specific helmets. So that was kind of the starting process, which then ultimately led me into the development of N-Pro.
Okay, so with your background in that, it's obviously it's helped you on your Pro journey, I imagine.
Yeah, so the testing of hurling helmets is very severe. We were using air cannons from about 30 centimeters away. They were firing the balls and also steel discs at the helmets. So that gave me an awful lot of experience in terms of different materials for impact protection, test methodologies. So that led me. And it was a huge help in terms of developing N-Pro.
And just before we go into more detail about N-Pro, can you sort of briefly just for a bit of context, can you explain head injuries, concussion? How does that sort of work, and how important is understanding that process in sport?
Yeah, so I suppose if you look at the definition, first of all, I think one of the most important points is that concussion is a brain injury. So it's defined as a complex pathophysiological process affecting the brain, which is induced by biomechanical forces. So if you look at any disease or illness, the best way to address that is to reduce the risk factors. So, one thing that all the medics are in agreement about concussion is that it's a biomechanical force that causes the injury. So, what we've looked at doing is reducing that risk factor by as much as possible. So, in terms of concussions, you can get a concussion in a number of different ways. For instance, you could be tackled around the hip and you could end up with a concussion. What we're focusing on is direct impacts to the head and reducing those by as much as possible.
Okay, so you have the idea for N-Pro. When did that come about? The idea. Who did you set it up with, and what sort of was the inspiration for that idea, I suppose?
Yeah, so what got me started on all of this was an interview I read a number of years ago by John Fogarty. So he's the current Irish scrum coach, and he gave an interview with one of the Sunday papers here in Ireland, detailing he was forced to retire through multiple head injuries. And I was well aware of concussion and all of those injuries, but I suppose what really caught my attention was the human aspect of the story, where he was spending days in a darkened bedroom and couldn't face his wife or his kids. So that kind of really caught my attention. I went home and I spoke to my wife, Sandra, about it. So she has a PhD in biomedical engineering. So her whole career has been in medical device innovation and also clinical research. So I said, I think if we combine both of our skill sets from the medical background and the sports industry, I think we can make a difference here. So that got us started off on a long journey of R&D for Inpro.
Yeah, and so you mentioned you've both got the skill sets, you can bring them together, but even so, you have the idea. How do you go and then make that idea become reality?
So what we said is, when you look at the issue, it's a very, very complex injury. So it has been described as the most complex injury to the most complex organ in the body. So we said that we're going to have to go about this in a very scientific manner, because it's such a huge topic, and also we were up against some very big sports brands. They would be our big competitors. So we set about a long R&D journey. We worked with university groups around the world that carried out independent research for us. We worked with medical device tester laboratories, and we worked very closely with players and teams. So it was a long R&D journey, but we really needed to go about it in a scientific manner and gather the evidence.
Yeah, and so in terms of Enpro, as you mentioned, there are lots of rugby helmets, scrum caps, whatever you want to call them out there. What is it that sets Enpro apart from the ones to already be found in the market?
So I suppose our key differentiator is impact protection. So in terms of other brands of rugby headgear that are out there at the moment, we can offer 4 times better impact protection than what's available. So if you take a traditional scrum cap, it has 3 layers in it, an inner layer of fabric, an outer layer of fabric, and a 10 millimeter single piece of foam in the middle. What we have designed is a multi-layer system that can deal with energy repeatedly. So in terms of the look and the feel of our product, it looks like what's there, and that was by purpose, because at the beginning we sat down with players and we asked them what would they like to see in the product, what would they not like to see, and all of the overwhelming feedback was that this had to be comfortable to use, the fit had to be right, and that they didn't want something that was going to look too space age, we'll say. So it looks like what's there at the moment, but how it performs is very, very different. Also as well, we sat down with the players and we asked them, what is it that you don't like about current scrum caps? So they all came back with the same 3 or 4 points, really. Comfort and fit was an issue for an awful lot of players. Ventilation was an issue. Peripheral vision was an issue, and hearing, acoustics was an issue. So we looked at addressing all of those points as well as the impact protection in our final product. So the feedback has been excellent, from top level international players right down to mini players just starting the game.
Yeah, and so that process of speaking to professionals, to rugby players, the research, the development, how long was that overall process? How long did it take until you knew that, okay, this is it, this is ready to go?
So we'd over 3 years of an R&D phase before the product was launched. So yeah, it was a long journey for us, but we wanted to make sure that everything was right, that feedback was right from the players, that the science was showing us the right data. So we couldn't rush into the market too soon. We wanted to be sure that it was right. So it took us over 3 years of development.
Yeah,
and that's ongoing all the time.
Okay, and so is there a specific market, if you like, that you aim the head guards at? So is it more so elite sports, or does it not matter? It can be for anyone who wants to play the game.
So it's been designed for anyone. We have 5 sizes, so it'll fit an under 6 right up to a senior international, and it's been used right across the game. In terms of kind of the business case, the biggest market for us is the underage market. That's where you have the most players. So it's very much the market is very much a pyramid shape. You have huge numbers at under 18 level, and then as is the same across all sports, there's a fall off as you get older. But yeah, the product has been designed for use by all ages.
Okay, and so then you mentioned sort of where it's being used, professional sports. Have you got any examples of where that's being used?
So Ireland were playing in the Six Nations last week. Played against Italy. Ultan Dillane was playing for Ireland in that. So yeah, we have an awful lot of professional players across the top 14, the Pro 14, the Premiership, Super Rugby. Yeah, it's been used all over the place by professional players.
Great stuff. And so if we just move away slightly from MPro as a product and talk about who has been the biggest influence for you in terms of developing MPro?
So really, it's been a mixture of both the players and also the scientific community. I couldn't pinpoint a single person because we've worked with so many. We've worked with research groups all over the world on this, and we've also we've worked with players all over the world. But ultimately, a huge driving factor here for both myself and Sandra was that we're parents ourselves, and our kids play rugby. So ultimately, what we want to see is there's a lot of fear out there amongst parents that they don't want their kids playing contact sports, but really the benefits here outweigh the risk. The benefits to team sports are absolutely huge. So us as parents, we wanted to see that our kids could go out and play with the best level of protection, and they also get all the benefits of playing team sports.
And in terms of you as a business, you as a CEO, what do you think has been the biggest challenge you've faced in terms of the coronavirus pandemic?
So obviously, when we're involved in the sports industry, the lack of games, was a huge issue for us. So we're in the second wave at the moment. The first lockdown affected us a lot more because all training and all games were cancelled. We're in the second wave now in Ireland, and they're allowing the pro game to go ahead, but also children are allowed train in groups of 15. So the second half of the year hasn't affected us as much. It's don't get me wrong, it's still having an effect. But yeah, the first half of the year, we took a severe hit because of the lack of games and lack of training.
Yeah, and so to me, it seems that when talking about sports technology generally, the noises coming out of Ireland at the moment is that the industry is just doing so well. Do you have any idea or thoughts on why that is?
I suppose over the last kind of 20, 30 years, there's been an awful lot of different things that have clicked into place. Like if you go back, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, they introduced free education here. So there was no university fees. So it allowed, I suppose, my generation opportunities that previous generations didn't get. So we have a very well educated workforce here. There's also an awful lot of government supports. So there's an ecosystem that has been built in terms of driving startups. So we have a government agency here, Enterprise Ireland, that deal specifically with export focused startup companies in all various sectors. So the whole idea here is that obviously Ireland is a small country, it's a small market, so you need to have global ambitions to engage with Enterprise Ireland, and yeah, there's a brilliant startup ecosystem here.
And just so in terms of startups, you obviously had your idea, you had your Pro idea, influenced by, like as you've mentioned. As if there were somebody who wanted to start up, an entrepreneur, that type of thing, what advice would you give them if they were just starting up?
Well, I think the biggest learning that I've taken from all of this, well, there's been a number of them. Like as I said, there's a great ecosystem here. People are willing to help, which is brilliant. There's loads of people that you can bounce ideas off, but a lot of the time you don't listen to the advice. So like I remember when I started off fundraising, for instance, people said to me, you're going to need X amount of money, but that's what you're budgeting for. But in reality, it's going to take you twice as long to get to market as you think, and you're going to need twice as much money. Now, of course, everyone thinks that they're different and that they'll do it exactly as per the plan. So I think one of the biggest learnings if I could have my time over again, in terms of fundraising, I would have raised more money at the beginning, because things always do go wrong. It'll always take you longer than you think. And really, when you're fundraising, it's nearly a full-time job. There's an awful lot of effort goes into it. So if you could raise more money at the beginning, it then gives you that extra bit of runway to focus on the business rather than being distracted by fundraising. So get sufficient runway in place, and that allows you to grow the business.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, again, moving away from the business side, more about you. What helps you switch off from your work, if that's possible, if you can?
So I'm very involved in sport. We have 3 children, and I'm involved in a lot of their coaching at underage. So like our kids are involved in hurling and camogie. So camogie is the female version of it, and also rugby. So I manage my son's under 14 team in hurling. So I absolutely love that. It's brilliant working with the kids. It's just a total distraction from the day job, and it's brilliant. I love it.
And do you still play any sport yourself?
Yeah. So I was playing hurling up till about a month or 6 weeks ago. Yeah. So the season ended then. So I mean it's just a social thing. It's great to be meeting up with your friends, and it's a decompress from the day job.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of a sports team, do you have one that you support or you follow, whether it's in hurling or whether it's rugby or football or whatever?
Yeah, so my two big passions in sport would be hurling and rugby. Our local team here is Connacht, playing in the Pro 14. The guys playing there have been a great supporter of Pro, and I'm a huge fan of Connacht. So I've followed them all over. I was out in Toulouse last year, the end of last year, for Heineken Cup. I'd be a big supporter of Connacht, and obviously Ireland then as well.
Yeah, that's a nice link to make. And so for you, it's a difficult question, but who would be your favorite athlete of all time?
A very, very tough question to nail it down. There's so many across so many sports, but I suppose one guy that I always think of, and I have a large poster of him hanging here in my office, would be Muhammad Ali. I was always, now obviously he was well before my time, but I just think a brilliant character, an amazing athlete.
Yeah, just for everything that he did.
Yeah.
And who's the most impressive or inspiring person that you've ever met, whether it's through your work or just generally?
Yeah, so again, a very tough one. I think someone who has definitely inspired me. I haven't. I know it's a bit of a dodge of the question because I haven't actually met him. But during the lockdown, I read Phil Knight's biography, Shoe Dog. So the founder of Nike. I found it a brilliant read because it's amazing when you look at Nike now and the mammoth organization that they've turned into. But like everyone else, they were a startup, and they, he details the struggles that they went through. So that's hugely inspiring to as a startup company to see that we don't we often don't think that these large organizations, they all started somewhere, and they were one guy in an office that started this off. So yeah, I would probably say him.
Okay. And finally, Mark, then, what does the future hold for Empro? Are there any specific sports you'd love to get more involved in? Anything like that?
Yeah, so we designed the product for rugby to begin with, but the plan was always to expand into other sports. Now, we haven't launched new versions yet, but already the product has been used across multiple sports. So we've had rugby union, we've had rugby league, we've had Aussie rules players down in the AFL use the product. We've had soccer players in the Premiership. We've actually had a lot of approaches from mixed martial arts fighters. So there seems to be a big demand there within their sport for better head protection. So yeah, we have ambitions to expand into other sports, but at the moment we're focusing on rugby. We want to expand out into new markets, and yeah, so exciting times ahead.
Definitely. Well, listen, thanks a lot for finding the time to come speak to us, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks very much, Oliver.
Cheers, mate.